Michael Riley was the proud father, Catherine Riley, the devoted mother, Emily the golden daughter, and Ryan the quiet son. Together, they looked like the perfect family, successful, admired, untouchable. But behind the polished smiles and beautiful home, betrayal was growing like a shadow. When Catherine suddenly vanished, the truth that emerged would shock not only investigators, but an entire community, proving that the deadliest secrets can hide inside the walls of a family that looks flawless from the outside. The Riley family seemed like the perfect picture of suburban success, the kind of household people admired from afar and quietly compared themselves to. Their home stood at the end of a well-kept street, a white two-story house with a manicured lawn and a garden Catherine Riley tended with care. Michael Riley, the father, was a businessman whose face regularly appeared in the local newspaper at charity events. Catherine was known as a graceful, attentive mother who hosted holiday dinners and never failed to bring baked goods to community fundraisers. Their children, Emily and Ryan, excelled in school and carried themselves with the confidence of kids who had grown up never worrying about bills, rent, or where their next meal was coming from. From the outside, it seemed as though this family had found the formula for a perfect life. Neighbors would often remark on how lucky they were. Their smiles seemed effortless, their schedules organized, their conversations polite and measured. No one suspected that beneath the surface of these polite exchanges and polished appearances, the Riley household was becoming a place of tension and mistrust. The cracks were small at first, but they were real, and over time, they grew impossible to ignore. It began quietly, in ways most outsiders would never notice. Catherine had started to appear tired, her once warm smile fading quickly when she thought no one was looking. Michael's business, though still respected, was not as stable as he let on. Investments had gone wrong, debts were piling up, and the family's wealth was no longer as secure as the community believed. These financial troubles stayed hidden from friends and neighbors, but inside the house, the stress weighed heavily. Catherine wanted honesty and solutions, while Michael insisted on maintaining the image of stability, no matter what it cost. But money was only one layer of their troubles. The children, though praised for their achievements, had secrets of their own. Emily, the older child, was ambitious in ways that made even her parents nervous. She wanted more than what the family could give, always chasing a sense of control and independence. Ryan, younger and quieter, lived in Emily's shadow, often overlooked and left to his own devices. Catherine had tried to keep the peace, but her journal, later found by investigators, revealed she felt increasingly isolated in her own home. She described feeling as though her every word was being watched, as if someone within her own family saw her less as a loved one and more as an obstacle. Think about that for a moment. Imagine being surrounded by people you've raised, supported, and cared for, only to start doubting their intentions. What would you do if the people you trusted most began to feel like strangers? If you've ever sensed that a smile or a kind word wasn't quite genuine, let us know in the comments. And while you're here, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where hidden truths finally come to light. The Rileys had mastered the art of appearances. Family photographs captured at holidays showed them huddled together, eyes bright, and faces glowing under festive lights. Social media posts painted a picture of dinners out, vacations to the coast, and milestones celebrated with laughter. Yet Catherine knew better than anyone that these photos and captions were only fragments of the truth. Behind the camera, arguments were frequent, and silences stretched longer than they should have. Neighbors remembered Catherine as someone who often lingered a little too long in conversation, as though she needed an excuse to stay away from her own front door. She would walk the dog late at night, slowly, almost reluctantly, returning home. But no one thought to question it. After all, everyone believed the Riley family had everything. The truth is, when pressure builds inside a family, it rarely stays hidden forever. Secrets leave traces. Resentment finds its way into small actions, like the cutting tone of a remark, or the look that lingers too long. By the time the first real signs of betrayal emerged, the foundation had already been weakened. Looking back, detectives would later describe the Riley home as a stage set for a play, where each character was performing for the outside world while privately resenting their roles. Michael was the proud provider who could no longer provide. Catherine was the supportive wife who carried fears no one wanted to hear. Emily was the perfect daughter, masking ambition that had curdled into greed. And Ryan, quiet and overshadowed, was a witness to a storm gathering in silence. What no one realized at the time was how quickly these tensions would escalate. The family's need to maintain appearances wasn't just about pride. It was about survival. Each of them was hiding something they couldn't afford to expose, and Catherine, caught in the middle, had started piecing together truths that others desperately wanted to keep hidden. The Riley family looked perfect, but behind the polished doors of their white suburban home, betrayal was already taking root. Catherine Riley's sudden disappearance stunned everyone who knew her. She was the kind of woman who lived by routine. She drove the kids to school, checked in on her elderly mother every Thursday, and rarely missed her morning jog around the neighborhood. So when she was nowhere to be found one cool autumn morning, it didn't take long for people to notice. Her car sat untouched in the driveway, her keys on the kitchen counter, and her phone placed neatly next to her purse. Nothing seemed out of place, yet Catherine was gone at first. Some assumed she had taken a short trip to clear her head. After all, the stress of running a household under the pressure of financial troubles could weigh heavily on anyone. But as hours turned into days, the absence became impossible to ignore. Neighbors started asking questions. Friends called repeatedly with no answer. It wasn't long before the police were called in, and the Riley family found themselves under a microscope. The initial investigation focused on the most obvious details. There were no signs of a struggle in the house. No broken windows, no forced entry, no overturned furniture. Everything was in its place, which was strange in itself. Most missing persons cases begin with some clue of disruption, but here, the silence of the house was unsettling. It was as though Catherine had simply evaporated from her own life. Detectives began interviewing the family, and this is where things started to feel unusual. Michael Riley, her husband, seemed oddly composed for a man whose wife had vanished. He explained to police that Catherine had been dealing with depression and suggested she might have left on her own. His account painted her as fragile, even unstable, but when detectives spoke with the children, a different picture emerged. Emily, the daughter, insisted her mother had been perfectly fine, happy even, in the days leading up to her disappearance. Ryan, the younger son, added yet another version. He claimed Catherine had hinted at wanting to leave the family, though he couldn't provide details. 3 people, 3 very different stories. Who would you believe in a situation like this? Would you take the word of the calm husband, the cheerful daughter, or the confused son? Comment below with what your instincts tell you, because in cases like these, first impressions can be deceiving. The inconsistencies were troubling. Detectives dug deeper into Michael's story and quickly uncovered something alarming. Just weeks before Catherine went missing, Michael had taken out a substantial life insurance policy in her name. To outsiders, that detail alone looked damning. Why would a man whose marriage appeared picture perfect suddenly prepare for his wife's possible death? The discovery added fuel to suspicions, but investigators knew not to jump to conclusions. Sometimes the obvious suspect isn't the guilty one. Friends of Catherine painted a far different story than her husband had. They described her as lively, strong-willed, and full of plans for the future. She had recently spoken about taking a trip with her sister and had even enrolled in an art class at the community center. None of that aligned with the idea of a woman preparing to walk away from her life. Catherine's journals, later found hidden in a drawer, confirmed this image. She wrote of stress and arguments, but also of her determination to move forward. Meanwhile, neighbors recalled seeing unusual activity around the house. One mentioned that Emily had been spotted late at night, moving boxes from the garage into her car. Another claimed that Ryan seemed withdrawn, avoiding his friends, and rarely leaving his room. These little details didn't prove anything, but they added to the sense that the Riley household was hiding something more sinister than a simple disappearance. As detectives pieced together the timeline, one thing became clear: Catherine had not left voluntarily. There were too many loose ends, too many contradictions, and too much at stake. The family was collapsing under the weight of their own stories. Each interview only raised more questions. Why did Michael emphasize Catherine's supposed depression when no one else noticed it? Why did Emily describe her mother as cheerful when Catherine's journals showed deep concern about her daughter's behavior? And why did Ryan seem both evasive and frightened, as if he knew more than he dared to say? The deeper police looked, the more it seemed that Catherine's disappearance wasn't random at all. It was deliberate, calculated, and tied to secrets buried inside her own home. What had started as a missing persons case was now unraveling into a web of betrayal. The life insurance policy, the inconsistent stories, the strange movements at night, all of it pointed to the unsettling possibility that Catherine had been silenced by someone in her family. Behind the calm exterior of the Riley household, a storm was gathering. The truth was there, waiting to be uncovered, and when it finally came to light, it would shake the entire community to its core. Detectives refused to accept the simplest explanation for Catherine Riley's disappearance. They returned to the house again and again, convinced that the truth was hiding within its walls. Every room was searched, every document examined, and every corner scrutinized. It was during one of these follow-up searches that investigators found the first true lead: a stack of bank records tucked away in a desk drawer, hidden beneath old receipts and utility bills. What they revealed changed the course of the investigation. The accounts showed large sums of money being siphoned from Michael Riley's business and redirected into secret accounts under the children's names. At first glance, it looked like Michael might have been hiding funds for himself, perhaps planning to escape after his wife's disappearance. But the transfers were irregular, clumsy even, and detectives suspected someone inexperienced had tried to cover their tracks. It didn't fit Michael's polished and calculating persona. Instead, suspicion began to drift toward someone younger, someone reckless enough to make mistakes. At the same time, Catherine's journals came to light, buried in a box at the back of her closet. They painted a picture of a woman, increasingly isolated and afraid. Page after page described her unease. She wrote about hearing whispers outside her bedroom door, about money vanishing from accounts without explanation, and about her growing suspicion that her daughter was not as innocent as she appeared. Catherine never accused anyone directly, but her words hinted at betrayal that ran deep. "I feel like I'm being watched," one entry read. "Even in my own home, I no longer feel safe." The focus shifted to Emily, the family's golden child. To the outside world, Emily was brilliant, charming, and destined for success. Teachers praised her intelligence, neighbors admired her politeness, and Michael proudly introduced her as his pride and joy. But detectives learned that beneath the surface, Emily had been forging documents and stealing from her parents' accounts. She wasn't just experimenting with rebellion. She was orchestrating a scheme to secure money for herself. The discovery was devastating. Catherine had uncovered Emily's actions and, according to the journal, had confronted her daughter about it. She planned to put a stop to it, but those plans ended the night she disappeared. The theory was chilling. Catherine's disappearance was not about Michael's financial troubles or Ryan's silence. It was about Emily's growing desperation to protect herself from exposure. Still, the investigation had to consider all angles. Detectives questioned Ryan again, probing for signs of involvement. He admitted he knew about some of Emily's secretive behavior, but claimed he was too scared to say anything. His fears seemed genuine, as though he had been trapped in a conflict between loyalty and terror. Evidence mounted against Emily when detectives pulled data from Catherine's phone. Though the device was found abandoned on the counter, forensic analysis revealed deleted messages. Some were drafts Catherine had written, but never sent pleas for help addressed to her sister, warning that Emily had been manipulating the family's finances and threatening her in subtle ways. The drafts suggested Catherine had been close to exposing the truth before she vanished. As investigators pieced these details together, the Riley household no longer looked like a family torn apart by circumstance. It looked like a carefully woven web of deceit, where each member was entangled in secrets they could not escape. Michael's suspicious insurance policy remained a looming question, but evidence suggested he may have been preparing for financial disaster rather than plotting murder. Ryan's quiet behavior seemed less like guilt and more like fear. Emily, however, stood at the center of every trail of evidence. The breakthrough came when detectives examined the garage and basement more closely. They noticed faint traces of bleach, as though someone had scrubbed the area clean. Forensic teams tested the surfaces and found microscopic blood particles. Though not enough to draw immediate conclusions, it raised the terrifying possibility that Catherine had never left the house alive. The discovery aligned too closely with the suspicions drawn from her journals. The picture that emerged was more sinister than anyone had expected. Catherine had stumbled onto a truth that threatened to unravel the family's carefully constructed image. Her daughter, desperate to maintain control and conceal her schemes, had far more to lose than anyone realized. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal, a fracture so deep that it crossed the most sacred bond of all, the bond between mother and child. Detectives now faced the horrifying possibility that Catherine's disappearance was not just about greed but about silencing the one person who could expose it. And as the case pressed forward, the final pieces of the puzzle were about to reveal something even darker than betrayal. They would uncover evidence that transformed the missing persons case into a full-fledged murder investigation, and the truth would shock everyone who thought they knew the Riley family. The investigation had reached a point where speculation was no longer enough. Detectives needed undeniable proof, something that could cut through the conflicting stories and silence the rumors that had begun to circulate in the community. Weeks of combing through the Riley home finally paid off when forensic teams returned to the basement. This time, they pulled back old carpet that had been nailed down in one corner. Beneath it, stains invisible to the naked eye glowed under forensic light. DNA tests confirmed what everyone feared: those stains belonged to Catherine Riley. She hadn't walked away. She hadn't run off to start a new life. She had been killed inside her own home. The discovery reframed the entire case. Detectives began reconstructing the likely timeline of events, pulling together every shred of evidence they had collected: the financial fraud, the deleted phone messages, the blood evidence, and Catherine's journals, all pointed in one direction. It was Emily, the daughter, who had the strongest motive, the clearest opportunity, and the most to lose if her mother exposed the truth. The carefully maintained image of the perfect child was unraveling, revealing something far darker beneath. When confronted with the evidence, Emily at first tried to maintain her composure. She insisted her mother must have staged everything, that Catherine had been more troubled than anyone realized, and that she was being framed. But forensic science left little room for denial. Fibers from Emily's clothing matched those found in the basement. Traces of Catherine's blood were discovered in the trunk of Emily's car. Each piece of evidence layered on top of the next, until her defenses collapsed under the weight of fact. The community was stunned. People who had once praised Emily as a role model, who had watched her grow up in school plays and neighborhood gatherings, couldn't reconcile the image of the bright young woman with the reality of what she had done. Her betrayal wasn't just against her mother. It was against the trust of everyone who believed in her. Michael, once the primary suspect, was cleared of direct involvement, though his decisions had indirectly paved the way for disaster. His life insurance policy, his financial secrecy, and his obsession with maintaining appearances made him look guilty. But in the end, it was his own daughter who had taken matters into her hands. During her confession, Emily admitted that the confrontation with her mother had spiraled out of control. Catherine had discovered too much, and Emily felt cornered. She feared exposure, feared losing the life of privilege she had built for herself, and feared that her ambitions would crumble before they even began. Instead of facing the consequences, she made a decision that shocked even hardened investigators. She chose silence through violence. The act wasn't impulsive, as many might have hoped to believe. It was deliberate, planned, and executed with cold calculation. The trial was a spectacle that gripped the entire region. Courtrooms were packed, media swarmed the streets, and every detail of the Riley family's collapse was dissected in front of the public. The once perfect family became a symbol of how easily trust could fracture, and how ambition, unchecked, could rot even the strongest bonds. Emily sat in court, no longer the golden child, but a defendant accused of betraying the most sacred relationship of all. The jury took little time to reach a verdict. She was found guilty of murder, and her sentencing ensured she would spend decades behind bars. The aftermath of the case left scars that could never heal. Michael, though spared prison, lived under the shadow of suspicion for years, his reputation permanently destroyed. His business crumbled, and he became a shell of the man he once was. Ryan cut ties with his sister completely, haunted by guilt that he hadn't spoken up sooner about what he had seen and suspected. The Riley home, once the crown jewel of the neighborhood, was sold quietly and left behind, its walls bearing silent witness to the betrayal that had unfolded within. What makes this case so chilling isn't just the crime itself, but the layers of deception that surrounded it. Catherine had trusted her family, fought to protect them, and believed that truth would prevail if she exposed what she had discovered. Instead, her honesty cost her everything. Emily's betrayal revealed how easily love can be twisted into fear, and how ambition can turn family into enemies. Stories like this remind us of an uncomfortable truth. Danger doesn't always come from strangers lurking outside. Sometimes it comes from the very people we sit across from at the dinner table. Sometimes the ones we love most are the ones capable of the deepest betrayal. And in the case of the Rileys, the shocking truth destroyed not only a family, but an entire community's sense of safety. The Riley case lives on as a haunting reminder of how fragile trust can be, and how quickly perfection can crumble when secrets take root. Catherine's voice, preserved in her journals, became the final piece of evidence that ensured her daughter could not escape justice. In the end, it was her words, written in fear but with courage, that told the world the story. Her voice was stolen from her before she could speak it aloud.